The first 3 years of my tenure, we had significant growth, at a rate either 2.5 or 3 times greater than what the state was growing over that same span on the SBAC exam. Well, we haven't had an SBAC exam to benchmark those things against. And we are doing our iReady data, and there's no doubt that whatever you want to call it, whether it's learning loss, learning lag, unfinished, I don't care the political term you choose to use, the pandemic has had a significant impact on the growth of kids. And so we're going to have to kind of double down our efforts.
Somewhere in between San Francisco and Los Angeles is Fresno, California. 542,107 people. It's one of the largest agriculture producing centers in the world, and the odds are, if you've eaten a fruit or a vegetable before, then you've tasted Fresno. This anomaly city with affordable housing and strong job market falls short in its most important metric for the future. The Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, or SBAC, is taken each year by students to measure proficiency in literacy and math. Going back to 2016, statewide test scores showed 49% of students passing literacy and 37% passing math. Fresno Unified students fell short of state scores, with 31% meeting standards for literacy and 22% for math. Over the next 3 years, California improved 2.1 and 2.9 percentage points. And with more room to improve, Fresno Unified scores went up 7.3% in literacy and 7.9 percentage points in math. With the onset of the COVID pandemic, Fresno Unified's growth trend halted in its tracks as the world shut down, leaving our classrooms empty and our students at home. With no SBAC test to measure students, Fresno Unified continued to administer the iReady test during the shutdown, discovering a significant learning loss with only 16% of K-8 students meeting standards for literacy and only 7% for math. 7%. That's less than 1 in 10. This is public information that needs to be addressed, and Fresno Unified agrees.
One of the things I think you hear said a lot, which is a really common talking point used, is you guys are second only to Detroit or Cleveland and Detroit, and the reality of that, it's not factual.
The National Assessment of Educational Progress, or NAEP for short, produces the nation's report card. It's important to note that not all districts participate in the NAEP. For 8th grade math, Fresno is tied for 23rd out of 26 districts. In 8th grade reading, Fresno Unified is tied at 22nd.
The reality is that's the nation's report card, or the NAEP assessment. The NAEP is administered every 2 years, in odd-numbered years. 26 schools reporting their NAEP results is not a cross-section of, it's the same narrative. You are behind, and there's some significant areas where you need to grow, and we're growing at a pace which is better than most of the other people that are in that same crucible. Now, when you start lower, there's more room to grow. I mean, that part, we just not walk by that and acknowledge.
It's one thing to compare Fresno to state and national statistics, but how do they fare against their closest neighbor? The city of Clovis lies across the street from Fresno's northeast side, and if you weren't from the area, you could cross into Clovis without even knowing. Despite its close border with Fresno, Clovis Unified School District is in a much different position. Before the pandemic, Clovis Unified 11th graders in 2018-19 met standards for reading and math not only above Fresno, but exceeded state averages.
What's frustrating to educators is that the conversation seems to always start with, well, we just got to get rid of bad teachers. Reform always seems to start with that conversation, and it never seems to start with the conversation of, what are we doing within the district? What are we doing in leadership in order to make the best possible situation for that teacher and that student?
Funding a massive school district like Fresno Unified is expensive. Even before the state and federal government started handing out extra cash to help with schools during the pandemic, Fresno Unified was getting more per student than the state average. Preceding the pandemic, Fresno Unified's budget increased by 42% over 5 years and has gone over $1 billion with pandemic assistance kicking in. California doles out funding based on average daily attendance. Fresno Unified currently receives $14,099 per student, $831 more than the state average. Clovis Unified receives $11,241 per student, $2,857 less than Fresno. Are Fresno Unified parents seeing a return on their tax investment?
The scary part is it's not just a money game. Like, there is money right now. There is one-time revenues to try and close the gap. What we're finding is there's not people. There's not a body of people out there. I mean, we had 158 vacancies today. COVID is remarkably hard on Fridays.
The way in which we approach education needs to change, and in order to lead that change, we need to figure out whose voices are we listening to. If you were to talk to educators, you would feel like their voices are left out of that conversation from the very beginning.
I think we need to ask, it's not so much about the adults, but what do our kids need? And grounding ourselves to, the last couple of weeks I've heard a lot about, adults being tired, and okay, but our kids are tired too.
We've relied only on one metric and we've disregarded the other metrics. We try to turn education into a science as opposed to realizing that it's really more about relationships and the art and the craft of education.
Well, in 2004, I believe our graduation rate was something like 36%. Today it's 85%. You don't get those numbers overnight.
Promoting students to the next grade level before they're ready, it has a snowball effect. 85% is a good graduation rate, but when only 29% of 11th graders are passing math before the COVID pandemic, are they actually prepared for the real world or even college? Before 2016, students were required to pass the CASE, the California High School Exit Exam. Fresno Unified got an assist from California when Governor Jerry Brown signed Bill SB 172 in 2015, undoing the requirement.
It really is going to take bringing your educators on board and showing that you value them again, because right now, that has really been the deficit at the adult level.
Things like school renaming or vaccine mandates, or you name it. There's a litany of different things that have kind of like taken their place at the forefront and put this conversation about academic success on the back burner, and that's what has to change.
We didn't know what we didn't know. We still don't know. But we're going to do everything we can every day, as long as we can, for as hard as I can. I want 100%. If it takes me another 20 years.
Despite annual funding increases, pandemic grants, and removal of graduation requirements, all metrics and data show the district and its students aren't meeting the standard. But why? Everyone agrees Fresno Unified's test scores are alarming. It's a long-known problem that affects the community and culture of Fresno. Are we preparing our students for the work world or college through social promotion? And where does the community's involvement come into play? On the next GV Docs.